Alan is a 30-year-old hardcore gamer who hasn't seen sunlight in weeks at this point, but who could blame him? He just finished playing a no-hit run on both Sekiro and Dark Souls at the same time. However, now that he's done with that, he needs a new game to play so he doesn't get bored. GTA 6 still isn't out yet, so he starts searching online for another game to play in the meantime, and that's when he comes across a game that never ends. Normally, you'd be concerned about the fact that a game just loaded onto his computer without permission, but he's too captivated to go back now. So he starts scrolling through the settings wheel to set the difficulty. He wants his gaming experience to be as traumatizing as possible, so he turns the difficulty all the way up to hell mode and picks the untested summoner class just to make it even more unpredictable. He then accepts all the terms and conditions without a second thought, but it turns out that there was a clause in there about transporting Alan to another world, so the next thing he knows, he's a newborn baby in the countryside. A year goes by like this, and being a baby isn't as bad as Alan thought it would be. He doesn't have to work or pay any bills, and he has good, loving parents taking care of him. His father's name is Rodin, and his mother is Theresia, and they seem like a lovely couple, but considering the fact that Alan set the game to hell mode, they're likely going to get the Wayne family treatment sooner or later. After Alan is put to bed for the night, he raises his arms and tries all the key phrases he knows in an attempt to open a status screen, because even though he's supposed to be a summoner, he has no idea how the whole summoning thing works. He decides to give it one last try before going to sleep, and this time, something really does appear. But it startles Alan so much that he screams, and his parents come running over to check on him as soon as they hear it, so he is forced to hide the book for now. After making sure Alan is okay, his parents leave his room, and as soon as they are gone, he pulls out his book again. He is so relieved that he finally gets to see his stats after a whole year of trying, and it's around what you would expect for a 1-year-old summoner. His summoning skills are all bottom tier, but the book says they will level up the more he uses them, so Alan decides to give it a try right now. From what he can tell, he's only allowed to summon H-ranked insects and beasts at his current level, but that seems ridiculously weak, so he isn't expecting much. Just then, the book flips to the message section, and Alan finds out that he received a letter from the god of creation of this world. The god basically apologizes for the delay in creating Alan's status book, but since the summoner class was still under development, it took him a whole year to sort through all the necessary paperwork for it. Alan doesn't really care about the apology, but if the god dev team had to rush to finish the summoner class, then there must be some bugs left in there for him to exploit, so he's eager to test it out. He wants to summon an insect first, but he soon realizes that he doesn't actually know how to activate his summoning ability. Normally, he would check the subreddit or watch a tutorial for these kinds of problems, but he doesn't have any internet here, so he's going to have to figure it out on his own. He thinks about it for a few minutes and eventually realizes that he needs to create an insect skill card first, so he gives it a try, and it works perfectly. Now he can finally summon his insect, but before he could do so, his mother comes to check on him again, so Alan is forced to pretend that he's asleep again. The next morning, once his parents are busy with their daily duties, Alan opens his grimoire and finally summons the grasshopper. The room fills with tons of bright lights, and at first, Alan is mesmerized by how pretty it looks, but then a giant grasshopper flies into his face and he freaks out. He eventually realizes that this is the grasshopper he summoned, so he tries to give it instructions. But it turns out that even though it's a summon, it still only has grasshopper intelligence, so it can't understand a word he's saying. On the bright side, Alan finds out that summoning the grasshopper gave him a boost to his agility and endurance stats, and he's really happy about that, but all his celebrating gets his mother's attention, and once she finds the giant grasshopper on the floor, she immediately squishes it. Over the next few days, Alan tinkers with the insect summoning ability, but he's tired of that now, so he decides to try out the beast summon next. He summons a mouse, and once again the book sends it flying straight at his face, but Alan was expecting it this time, so he's not as startled. The mouse comes with its own set of buffs, but it's still pretty dumb, so Alan can't really talk to it. That said, one of its abilities is called Scurry, and whenever Alan tells the mouse to use it, it does so without fail. That said, this mouse's ability is downright useless, so Alan figures he will need to level up his abilities in order to summon some of the more powerful creatures out there. His grimoire says he's allowed to stock up to 10 summoning cards at once, and fortunately, the buffs for each summon stack as well. So if he stacks 10 mouse summon cards, his attack and HP go up by 10. This already makes him stronger than any regular baby, but he's going to have to level up his skills if he wants to become truly overpowered. Normally, this wouldn't be hard to do, but remember how Alan selected Hell mode because he thought the difficulty would be fun? Well, leveling up now requires 100 times the normal amount of experience, so he's going to be stuck grinding for a long time. Just then, Rodin returns from a long day of hunting, and he's completely covered in blood, but it's okay because it's not his blood. He explains that he just hunted a great boar with the other men from the village, and Alan seems really interested, so Rodin asks him if he would like to come see it. Alan excitedly agrees, so Rodin hoists him onto his neck and starts taking him towards the kill site. This is Alan's first time actually getting to see the outside world, so he's enjoying all the new sights, but it took a lot longer to get to the boar than he thought it would, so he ended up falling asleep in Rodin's arms. Once they arrive at the kill site, Rodin wakes Alan up to show him the boar, and Alan is stunned because this thing is absolutely massive, and I'm not even sure how Rodin managed to take it down in the first place. A few moments later, the villagers nearby notice that Rodin has come back, so they all start cheering for him because he is today's MVP. Alan asks if a great boar is really that strong, so Gerda explains that it is a C-ranked monster, and it usually takes at least 20 men to take one down, so they are pretty tough. This info is really useful to Alan because it gives him a solid benchmark on the strength gap between ranks, but before he can even think about summoning any high-ranked monster, Alan is going to have to start grinding XP to level up. 10 months of intense grinding later, Alan has finally risen to a level 2 summoner, and the bump comes with great perks like an all-around boost to his stats, as well as the ability to summon G-rank creatures and fuse them. But doing so requires a lot of MP, so Alan hurriedly eats his dinner to recover some mana and heads back to his room to try it out. Unfortunately, when he opens his grimoire, it tells him he still doesn't have enough mana to fuse any summons because his max MP is too low, so it looks like he's going to need to do even more grinding before he can try anything new. By the time Alan is 3 years old, he has finally raised his MP stats high enough to use his level 2 skill, and with the fusion section, he is able to create a G-rank bird which he names Chappie. Chappie's main skill is voice mimic, and it can basically copy any voice perfectly, making it perfect for distracting enemies. Alan was also able to summon a frog and a mole, and the frog's only ability is to jump up and down while flashing as a distraction, but the mole is a lot more active and can dig a giant hole in a matter of seconds. The G-rank monster skills are a lot more useful than the H-ranks, so Alan is finally starting to enjoy the gaming experience in this world, but it's still going to take a long time before he's strong enough to actually fight anything. And speaking of fighting, Gerda's daughter, Krena, comes looking for Alan because she wants to play with him. Krena's idea of playing is challenging him to a duel, and normally, this wouldn't be a problem, but she's way too strong for Alan to keep up with. He even went all out with his summoned buffs just to give himself a fighting chance, but he's still no match for her. By the end of the day, Alan and Krena return home, and apparently, while Alan has been grinding his XP this past year, Rodin and Theresia were getting busy because she's pregnant again. Since his mother can't do much physical labor anymore, Alan volunteers to help with the harvest to make things easier for Rodin. He is sure he can do it because with all his buffs, he pretty much has the strength and stamina of an adult now. But Theresia and Rodin don't think it would be fair to make their son work, so they tell him he should just stick to doing basic house chores and playing with Krena. Rodin reminds him that he will eventually grow up and have to get a job, so he should enjoy his time as a kid while he doesn't need to work. Alan is a little upset about being turned down at first, but then he remembers that farm work is unbelievably grueling work, and no father would want to force their 3-year-old to do that kind of work, so he agrees to let it go. Rodin is glad to see that Alan understands, but as they continue with dinner, Theresia recalls seeing Alan in the backyard throwing rocks at a tree a little while ago, so she asks him what that was all about. Alan says he was just practicing for self-defense in case a monster attacks their home, but in reality, he was trying to see if he can learn skills aside from summoning by repeating an action over and over, but he didn't have much luck with that. Rodin is impressed by Alan's work ethic and says he can't wait for his appraisal ceremony. Alan has never heard of the appraisal ceremony before, so he asks Rodin what it is, and he is informed that when you turn 5, you are appraised to find out what talents you may have. And if Alan is lucky enough to receive a powerful talent, he might become very rich and successful in the future. Winter rolls around, and Alan decides to summon a grasshopper out in the snow to see how long it can survive, and it lasts a whole day out here, so he's pretty satisfied. However, that satisfaction quickly fades away when Krena comes outside and starts asking him to fight her again. Unsurprisingly, Alan ends up getting his ass handed to him. But while he was busy with his duel against Krena, he completely forgot about the grasshopper he summoned, and it ends up crawling onto Theresia's leg, scaring her so much that she ends up falling over. And falling over while pregnant is a big deal. Rodin runs over to check on her, and she says she's fine, but she clearly isn't because that fall just sent her into labor, so the baby's coming today whether they like it or not. Rodin tells Krena to go call her mother for help, and once she arrives, she helps Theresia through the delivery process. So by morning, the family has a brand new baby boy. Everyone is overjoyed, but Alan doesn't know how he should feel about this. He still isn't sure why a game reincarnated him into this world. But even though it was unexpected, he didn't have much going for him back in Japan, so he's not upset with how things turned out. That's why he has decided to focus solely on leveling up and protecting his new family, because they matter the most to him. By springtime, since Alan's appraisal ceremony is coming up, he asks his dad for some details on what it's like. His dad tells him that all kids have to do it once they turn 5, and if he happens to have an amazing skill, he has a decent chance of making it to the big leagues. But unfortunately, there's a lot of competition this year since a lot of the other kids are also turning 5, and that includes Krena. They all head to the commoner's city so they can undergo the appraisal, but as they approach the church, Alan notices that a lot of the other commoners look really well groomed. Compared to them, he's pretty much wearing rags, and now that he thinks about it, he's been wearing rags since the day he was born, so his family's finances must be way below average for this world, but that doesn't really bother him. They all gather in front of the church, and as the priests come out, they hear a lot of people making fun of the brokies in the crowd, so they tell everyone that they had better be careful of what they say. Blessings are distributed equally to all, so even the poorest farmer could inherit a powerful skill. The priests tell everyone to come inside for the appraisal, and as they are walking towards an altar, Alan notices 3 statues and assumes those must be the gods that are worshipped in this world. One of which is Elmea, the god of creation, and now that Alan thinks about it, Elmea was the one who sent him that apology letter for the class development delay. The first up for appraisal is Palomas, the son of the village chieftain, and he is instructed to place his hand on the crystal ball over there to display his stats. Palomas does as instructed, and on the stone wall, it is revealed that he possesses the merchant class, news that his father is really happy to hear. Alan was kind of expecting more to happen, but this is basically the same thing his grimoire does, with the only difference being the fact that it uses letter rankings instead of numbers. As the appraisal continues, some kids receive strong talents, while some don't receive any at all, and a few hours later, the only ones left are Krena and Alan. Krena is up next, so she excitedly runs up to the ball and puts her hand over it, but it suddenly starts glowing with an intense blinding light. Her father is worried that something might have gone wrong with the appraisal, but it turns out that the priests simply can't believe what they are seeing. According to the appraisal, Krena just received the Sword Lord class, one of the strongest in existence, and her dad is unbelievably happy about it, but she doesn't really understand what's so special about it. Alan isn't too surprised by the news since he's been getting his ass beat by her for years at this point, but next up is Alan's appraisal, so he is told to approach the altar. As he touches the ball, nothing happens for a few seconds, but all of a sudden, there's a large flash of light, and Alan is knocked back. Rodin rushes over to check on him, and after making sure Alan is alright, he walks over to the priest and asks what Alan's talent is since he doesn't know how to read. He's expecting something really good since the crystal reacted strongly, but to his shock, the priest informs him that Alan is completely talentless. Alan can't believe what he's hearing because he knows for a fact that he does have a talent, but when he checks the board, he realizes that all his stats are E rank across the board, and he blames Elmea for doing a shitty job coding the summoner class. Just then, Rodin hugs Alan from behind to comfort him since he doesn't want Alan to feel bad about being talentless. They head home together, and everyone treats him normally despite the revelation that he is classless, and Alan appreciates how much his family cares for him, but he knows he isn't really talentless. He can still use his grimoire just fine, so he assumes his E-rank stats must be because he is playing on Hell mode. All the other kids were the same age as him, and relatively equal in strength, so their rank must be a reflection of how much they will grow in the future as they level up. So since Alan requires 100 times the regular amount of XP to level up, his stats are all stuck at E rank, even if his actual attributes are pretty strong. Most people would get frustrated by this kind of setback, but Alan isn't some filthy casual who enjoys playing games for actual fun. He lives for the soul-crushing grind, but he can't help but worry that there's something wrong with his summoner class because at the bottom of his appraisal, he saw a confusing error code pop up, so he's going to be sending a lot of complaints to the devs about it. The next morning, Alan goes out with his family to visit Krena's family, but he notices that his dad has been acting a bit strange lately. Over at Krena's house, they're all about to celebrate Krena's appraisal as a sword lord, but Rodin still has a sour look on his face, and Jurda says he refuses to celebrate with him until he goes back to normal. At first, Alan wonders if Rodin is jealous of Krena and her family, but he knows his dad isn't that petty, so there must be something else going on here. The two of them continue arguing for a second until Gerda reveals that Rodin mentioned severing ties between their families before they sat down together. Rodin defends his decision by reminding Gerda that Krena is a sword lord now, and that means she practically has a guaranteed ticket out of this tiny serfdom, and if she's lucky, she might even become nobility if she's lucky. And if that happens, then being close to a poor family like Rodin's would only hold her back. Gerda yells that he doesn't care about any of that stuff, but Rodin keeps insisting that he's doing this for Gerda's own good, and the two resume their fight, but eventually, their wives pull them apart and get them to calm down. Alan is a bit surprised by how calm everyone was about this whole thing, so he asks Gerda's wife if it's normal for them to argue like this. She explains that this kind of thing used to happen all the time, but they always made up afterwards. All four of them are actually childhood friends who grew up in the same village, and around 10 years ago, when talks of making a new settlement started, they all decided to join the effort and work together to build their houses. Gerda and Rodin bonded a lot over that back then. Recalling the good times makes them realize how silly their fight was. A little while later, news arrives that the Knight's Order has shown an interest in Krena, and they are coming to see her. Alan assumes the news of Krena becoming a sword lord must be spreading really quickly. But while it's good that she has earned some recognition from the Knight's Order, Gerda is still a little concerned because she is too young to become a knight yet. Just then, one of the kids who got a good talent at the appraisal ceremony confronts Alan and tells him that as a talentless loser, he has no place here. Alan doesn't really care about being insulted, since he's still got his summoner power, but Krena won't stand for anyone picking on her best friend, so she tells the kid to back off and nearly chops off his finger before Gerda pulls her back. Just then, the chief announces that the Knight's Order has finally arrived, and everyone is thrilled since they rarely get to see the knights in person. The chief calls for Gerda and Krena to come introduce themselves to the knight captain. Krena is unbelievably excited because she has always wanted to become a knight, so getting to meet the knight captain must be a dream come true for her. Alan wonders if the knights are going to take Krena to the capital to train her. But before the knight captain could say anything, Gerda speaks up and says he can't let Krena go because she's still too young. The captain says that age doesn't matter because if she's a sword lord, then her skills would be more than enough to get her through the training, so there should be no problem. Unless, of course, they were lying about Krena being a sword saint just to trick the Knight's Order. Gerda assures the captain that he isn't lying, but it's already too late because the captain has decided to put Krena to the test. He orders his vice captain to prepare to have a duel with this 5-year-old, and without a second thought, the vice captain agrees. Gerda tries to get the knight captain to reconsider since he doesn't want to put Krena's life at risk, but he is told that if she doesn't fight, then it will serve as proof that she lied about her class, and she, along with her entire family, will be executed. The knights then bring out a sword for her to use, and most children would be terrified by this point, but Krena is so battle-hungry that the second she realizes that she gets to use an actual sword, she says she is willing to accept the duel. Everyone gets into position for the duel, and Leibrand faces off against Krena. So as the match begins, Krena charges at Leibrand with full force. Your eyes do not deceive you. She's swinging a sword that's twice her height like it's nothing, and she's actually giving Leibrand a run for his money, but he is still keeping her at bay relatively easily. The knight captain seems unimpressed by Krena's skills so far, but as the fight goes on, she manages to block one of Leibrand's strikes and prepares to retaliate. However, Leibrand punts her across the street and into one of the walls. Gerda is enraged by the way his daughter is being treated, but before he could do anything about it, he is pushed to the floor by the knights, along with Alan and Rodin when they try to interfere. Alan thinks this is completely unfair, because whether Krena is a sword lord or not, an adult is bound to have more battle experience than her. However, all of a sudden, Krena gets back on her feet, and she's got a menacing aura surrounding her. Without saying a word, she launches another all-out attack with laser focus, and this time, she is completely overwhelming Leibrand, so much so that she eventually slices his sword in half and nearly takes his head off with it. Krena is disappointed that the fight is over already, but she had a lot of fun, so she thanks Leibrand for playing with her and walks off, leaving him with the knowledge that he just lost to a 5-year-old. Gerda is relieved that Krena managed to survive and starts praising her for doing a good job, but then the knight captain approaches, and Gerda becomes defensive because he doesn't want him anywhere near his daughter. The knight captain now acknowledges that Krena is indeed a sword lord, and he apologizes for forcing her to fight in a duel. He says he would like to discuss her future with him, but Gerda firmly refuses. The captain says he can bring his friends with him to the meeting if it would make him feel better, and that would make Gerda feel a little safer, so he agrees. They all gather at the chief's house for lunch, and Zenov once again apologizes for the way he acted earlier. He explains that he was sent here by the baron of this territory to determine whether there truly was a sword lord in this village, and the results are undeniable. Zenov mentions that 3 years ago, there was a sword saint born to the family of a count, but this strikes Alan as weird since he knows for a fact that sword saints can only be born from low social statuses according to the game's design, so that one must have been a fake. Said sword lord went on to serve the royal family, but failed to meet expectations there, and upon reappraisal, it was discovered that they were actually an ordinary swordsman pretending to be a sword lord. It was also later discovered that several nobles were greatly exaggerating their abilities, so the kingdom had to establish a zero-tolerance policy for falsified talent results. That said, he is still truly sorry for putting Krena through such a harsh trial. He tells Gerda that he doesn't need to worry about them taking Krena away from him because they won't do that. They want her to continue her training at home, and when she turns 12, if she wants, she can attend the academy to become a knight. This was the end of episode 2. Subscribe to not miss the next part.